Hello! It is almost time. This video should be posted shortly before or immediately after the live stream announcement for Genshin Impact version 4.2. What does that mean? It's time to talk about Furina. This should hopefully be my final thoughts on Furina in pre-release. I have written a Google Doc that should be linked in the description below. This has been co-written / double-checked with our friend Dekadey over at Furina Mains as part of the theory crafting team there with me. So this is my Furina FAQ guide. Let's start with what Furina does. Furina is a 5-star Hydro character. She summons turrets. These turrets do damage and drain your HP. She has a burst. This burst uses the Fanfare mechanic that we'll be explaining shortly. TLDR, you get buffs. She has a passive that rewards her for building HP, and she has a passive that helps with recovery, which we'll also be talking about. Now that we got the baseline out of the way, let's talk about Furina. Why do you need a healer? This is the most common advice you will hear in the context of Furina. There are 2 reasons for this. The first one being Furina's elemental skill passive has a descriptor. Yes, it's a descriptor modifier. It's not a part of her talent list. Don't ask me why. It really should be here, but it is only in the text. If Furina is able to drain HP from your allies, for each ally she drains the HP of will increase the damage of her current elemental skill hit by 10%. That goes up to 40% for all 4 party members. Why is this important? Because Furina herself genuinely does a lot of damage. Field of reference for Furina's damage is Yelan / Jingzhou, and she can even do a bit more if you're properly enabling this 40% passive. What this means in practical terms, though, if you are, let's say, a self-sustaining Hydro DPS that is able to recover their HP to full after a charged attack, if you are choosing to not use a healer with that character, you're just losing damage on Furina, and Furina does enough damage for that to be a deficit that you have to overcome. That does not mean that that's not a damage increase necessarily, but it means it can be difficult to be one. So let's talk about Fanfare. Furina's Fanfare is her burst mechanic. She checks HP changes in the party, both positive and negative. Something I need to establish now: you cannot gain Fanfare going from 100% HP to 100% HP. You need to have taken damage to heal off damage to generate Fanfare. Each stack of Fanfare provides damage percent and healing bonus. At town level 10, that is 0.25 damage percent per Fanfare stack, with a cap at 300 Fanfare stacks at C0, 400 Fanfare stacks at C1 or plus. Furina herself aids in this process by draining HP from your allies every time her elemental skill does an action. This is fantastic. It ends up being about 2.5 to 3% HP drain per second, meaning you're generating about 10 Fanfare stacks per second just from Furina's drain. If you are actively healing that off, that is 20 Fanfare per second. If you are healing off all at once, let's say a character such as Jean or Baizhu's elemental skill or Mika's burst, you are generating the Fanfare from the damage you've taken previously. Does this mean Furina is hurt first rotations? Kind of, no. Maybe something that not a lot of people have been pointing out. A lot of the talk about Furina first rotation is irrelevant. It is first rotation of a Spiral Abyss clear, period. Not first rotation of a chamber, like with International or something like that. It is Hutao, where you are above 50% HP for your first rotation, and then you are never above 50% HP again, meaning it's a non-issue, and don't worry about it. Furina does enough self-damage. You will not be full HP at the end of your rotations. Don't worry about it. Speaking of healing, though, we do need to talk about Furina's Endless Waltz. This is her Ascension 1 passive. Whenever a party member is overhealed by someone who is not named Furina, your party members receive healing. What does this do? It means that if you were doing something like Neuvillette or Alhaitham with Shinobu, despite only fully healing one character, you are constantly proccing this overheal passive and giving Furina a lot of her personal damage back in these scenarios. Going back to the top where the drain works, every time you are able to proc Endless Waltz, even if you're at 50% HP, you're getting hits with the 140% multiplier. So that helps combat that a lot. It's also very good for making healers more effective. Furina herself is going to have a lot of HP. A lot of healers are not necessarily able to heal Furina from 50% to full HP, but a lot of healers are able to heal other characters from 50% to full HP and keep some characters at full HP, such as Gene Burst or other heals over time. Meaning Furina herself doesn't necessarily have to go from 50 to full. She can get patched up by Endless Waltz. It's quite convenient. I just wish her skill descriptions were a lot simpler. You know, it took me 7 minutes to explain these skill descriptions, and that's all we've talked about. I skipped some of them. She has an Ascension 4 passive, which is very similar to Nahida, Raiden, and Zhongli's. Not really Zhongli, more Nahida and Raiden. She gets damage percent for building HP up to 40k HP. It's good. It helps make HP Goblet better than Hydro Goblet. So let's talk about gearing. As a off-field HP scaling character who does elemental skill damage, she actually has a lot of weapon options. Regarding sets though, she only has one option, it's Golden Troop, use it. You can technically use 4-piece Tenacity if you were playing a character that would benefit enough from it, but I've yet to see one. Her 5-star weapon is Splendor of Tranquil Waters. This is obviously going to be her best weapon for personal damage. It is a crit damage weapon that gives you 28 HP percent and 24 damage percent. It's quite good. Something I will say about this weapon, in a lot of cases, you're going to end up wanting to use an ER Sans with it, which can hurt the weapon's performance relative to a lot of other weapons on the list. Specifically, the late anniversary reward if you've been playing since version 1.2. Festering Desire. Albedo stands, rise up, now is your chance. This is the catch for elemental skill. It is a match made in heaven for Furina. If you have this weapon, it is the best option you can use. It is 6% better than Fleuve, the fishing pipe from Fontaine, and it is competitive with the other 5-star weapon options like Primordial Jade Cutter and Kiev Khaj Nasut. Speaking of Kiev Khaj Nasut, I like this weapon a lot. It's probably what I will be using myself in most cases. This weapon gives Furina herself a ton of EM if you were doing Vape. Don't use this weapon when you're playing Furina with Nilo. Keep it on Nilo because the effect will overwrite with the most recent Keep Rocker and it does not stack. If you are playing anything else Dendro though, like a Hyper Bloom team with double Electro or double Dendro, this is the one you use. If you play with Hu Tao, this is an incredible weapon. It could be the one you use. It's very similar to Elegy on Yelan versus Aqua Simulacra. There's also PJC. This is a crit rate weapon. Furina is a crit rate Ascension, so it could be a little bit awkward to build a balanced crit ratio with it, but it does give 44.1 crit rate and 20% HP. It's just a big old stat stick. If your artifacts are not exactly ideal right now, this with an ER Sans is basically a very solid baseline to get you off the ground. Last banners, Dokkan's Assistant was available. This is a weapon that gives you energy, EM, and HP. This is pretty solid if you have it. I don't have much to say about this thing. There is the fishing pipe. This is going to be your most easily obtainable Furina weapon. The reason I'm choosing to point this out over Favonia's Sword, while Favonia's Sword provides energy for your entire team, it's also somewhat a highly contested weapon. Maybe you're normally using your Favonia's Sword on Kazuha or Jingchou. You're not going to be using Fleuve on either of them. So you're also getting more personal damage out of Furina for using it, despite having less energy generation for your team. Regarding Fleuve's energy recharge passive, that 5 seconds basically means during your setup for rotations, you're getting bonus efficiency on those particles. If you do use the battle pass, I have to talk about Wolffang. I honestly don't like this weapon. The reason for this is because it causes a lot of misinformation and confusion. This weapon does not stack off field. You cannot snapshot this weapon's stats. Not that being said, Furina does not snapshot at all anymore. So what you're getting from this weapon is you're getting, let's say, about 1 stack over the course of your rotation. You're getting the damage percent passive and you're getting the crit rate. So at minimum, it's pretty good. It's nice to have a crit rate weapon option. I just don't necessarily like it over the energy recharge main stats. That's my opinion. We'll see if that ends up being wrong on release. I talked about Golden Troop, use it. Main stat weapon options. My recommended general ER is going to be 180 to 160. This is a pretty broad range because it covers so much stuff. There are some teams, like 20-second freeze rotations, where you'll want more than 200 or around 200. But generally, this is a good baseline. When you're playing Furina in Dendro teams, you're playing longer rotations, which means she is generating more energy. Furina's energy generation is 1 particle every 2.5 seconds on the next hit from her elemental skill. So the longer your rotation is, the more energy she will generate, which means her energy rec becomes lower. This is important to mention in the case of Dendro teams, because these are teams where she wants to be played solo Hydro, and she will be generating more energy for herself. There is also the argument of HP versus Hydro Goblet. HP Goblet is better on paper, and it will be better on paper for quite a bit. You need a lot of HP subs, or an HP main stat weapon, or a fully maxed C2 buff to want Hydro Goblet. So keep Hydro Goblets and HP Goblets, but generally the HP Goblet is the one you're going to be using. Especially worth mentioning, HP Goblets are literally statistically more common drops. You are going to have a better HP Goblet than a Hydro Goblet. When you're using a HP Goblet, you definitely don't want to be using triple HP main stats, so definitely go for a crit hat. But you can use an HP hat, very similar to Yelan, especially if you were using a Hydro Goblet. It is always an option. Furina wants to be played with some healers. There are a lot of healer options. I took some time to call out what I think are the important ones. So here's a note. Furina drains 50% HP per rotation. If you want to be able to heal off incoming damage, it's not a bad idea to build your healers to actually be functional as healers, instead of trying to build your healers for damage. This means healing bonus circlets are actually really good. Maybe not really good, but they're certainly useful. Look out for healing bonus circlets. Roll them for high ER. In the case of healers, they're also the rarest main stats. So it's most likely to be the piece you're offsetting, say if there was a new healing set, or if you wanted to use Clam or VV on a character. There are AoE healers and single target healers. Jean's initial burst cast is an AoE heal. What I mean by an AoE heal, it heals your entire team instantly. And then she has a single target heal for an on-fielder that ticks over the next 10 to 12 seconds. Jean is a really good default example of an AoE healer for me, just because Jean is so simple. Her healing is for the team primarily in the initial cast. The on-fielder ticking will proc Furina's Endless Waltz passive, which will also provide additional healing for your team. Definitely something to mention. Jean has Anima Red Shred at C4, which is only important if your name is Xiao or Wanderer. C3 increases her heal, and the attack speed at C2 is kind of comfy. For now, VV is the set you'll be using on Jean, primarily. This is as of version 4.2. We do not have leaks for version 4.3 yet. There might be new sets coming soon. There is Baizhu. He is a Dendro healer. His elemental skill is an AoE heal, and his elemental burst is a single target heal. He also provides a shield, which is really nice for interruption resistance. Baizhu will typically be holding Instructors, Clam, sometimes Noblesse. These are the sets you'll be using on Baizhu. Generally, the best one will be Clam. Baizhu himself does a lot of clamage. Baiju's elemental skill cast does heal for less for your full party than Furina's Drain, but if you are using a weapon like Prototype Amber or his 5-star weapon, you have more stats, you're healing the entire team anyway, enough. The thing that makes Baizhu complicated, and the reason I have not done many calcs with him, is because he's Dendro, and Dendro makes things a bit complicated. It's not necessarily something I'm comfortable making perfect assumptions about. You should be able to use him for Burgeon Double Hydro Vape, but if you do get burning, that's not what you want to be seeing, and that's the reason I'm a bit right now. I assume Baizhu will be very good on release. I just don't want to guess. There is also mono Hydro teams with Baizhu and Kazuha, something you'll be able to do. Whenever there's a Dendro Aura on the target, you need to apply Hydro 3 times to have a Hydro Aura to swirl. Whenever there is a Dendro Aura, Baizhu, whenever you're doing EQ, will generally be able to apply a Dendro Aura, which can get in your way for swirling and cause inconsistencies. That being said, on paper, if all of these issues are not issues for Baizhu at all, he is significantly stronger than Jean in basically every case. Mostly because of clamage and just the additional Dendro reactions being very similar to VV and allowing you to use higher damage supports or more offensive supports. The shield is also a very nice thing about him. This is a bit speculatory, but I wanted to mention it because I have seen people write off Baizhu because I left him out of a lot of calcs. Charlotte is a character who will be on Furina's banner. It will be difficult to get Furina without having Charlotte, ideally. That being said, regarding Charlotte, she is an attack scaling healer, which means she doesn't benefit from Hydro Resonance to heal more, so your HP pools go up, and Charlotte doesn't heal anymore, which is a bit of an anti-synergy there. I don't know why she's an attack healer. I'm not really a fan of it, but she has a lot of set options. She can use Noblesse, she can use Tenacity, she can use Clam. Charlotte generates 3 particles on her Tappy every 12 seconds on an 80 cost burst without C4. With C4, her burst cost is significantly lower, making her much easier to use. She does not heal much without C1. After C1, her healing is more than good enough for Furina. C6 also provides a lot of healing from Charlotte, but it may be a bit redundant, but it's nice if you have it. You can invest less in her. It's always nice. Charlotte C4 is the energy constellation. You can get around that. It's not impossible to use her without C4, but TTDS without C4, I don't know. There is the other alternative to Charlotte for a lot of these cases. Mika, my guy, my man, Mika. He gives attack speed, and he can use Noblesse or Clam. He doesn't do a lot of clamage. He does like 50,000 clamage per rotation. Regarding Constellations, C1 helps him heal a lot. Very good. Also, Mika is an HP healer, so that's nice. He has access to a lot more weapon options. Because of that, he also heals more when there's Hydro Resonance. Mika's other important constellation is C4 for his energy requirement. Mika's attack speed is not useful for every team, but there are specific characters and interactions where it is useful and comparable to what Charlotte can do, which is very funny to me. Like, how ironic if Charlotte just isn't even better than Mika for Riesli. What a bra moment. Regarding single target healers though, there is Shinobu and Bennett. These are the 2 ones I wanted to highlight because I find them to be the most important to mention. Shinobu will be played generally as a Hyperbloom trigger, or you can use her as a healer with an offensive Animo character for Electrocharge Swirls, which are incredible and should not be underrated. Being able to trigger Bloom Pores is a really nice trait that Shinobu has regarding role compression for these Dendro teams. The Dendro teams I would recommend playing are going to be double Dendro with Alhaitham / Lignari, or if you wanted to do Nahida on field, it is not double Hydro Nahida Furina, it would be double Electro. So Shinobu, Fischl, Nahida Furina is the team I would recommend playing for that. The reason I mention this is because you're doing more damage that Furina is able to buff. Furina is buffing spread and aggravate reactions. She is not buffing Hyperbloom cores. So what you're trading in Hyperbloom cores, you're getting back and more in aggravate and spread. And there is also Bennett. Bennett is something I want to call out. There are rotations you can do to get Bennett to heal around the party, and they will be important. I'm going to talk about them right now. So you're going to use Bennett's burst. Then you want to do an elemental skill. You want to do 1 swap. So something like a Yelan E-skill or a Xingqiu E-skill. And then you're going to swap back to Bennett and do an additional elemental skill. What does this do? This heals 2 of the characters on your team, and then you swap into your main DPS. Let's say Hu Tao. So you're healing 3 characters instead of just healing 1. Very important. You want to be able to facilitate these rotations. This is how you make Bennett work with Furina. If you are able to make Bennett work with Furina, you're getting a lot of damage. But it is difficult to do, it's difficult to explain, it's a little difficult to recommend. And reminder, this is as of version 4.2. There will be more healers who synergize with Furina over the coming year. There will be more sets as well. I did want to talk about damage partners. There's a large misconception that Furina is only good with Fontinian characters. I'm not really sure where this comes from if you take the time to research and fully understand Furina's passives and skills. Furina's very complicated. I understand people not understanding the full kit, but it is a major misconception. This is not the case. As long as your rotation has sufficient healing, Furina is a universal damage increase. The closest thing I can liken Furina to in this example is Yelan and Kazuha. There is no such thing as a best Yelan team. There's no such thing as a best Kazuha team. There's no such thing as a best Furina team. Even if you are Hu Tao, a character who wants to be below 50%, Furina's buff is so significant. There's also the damage increase from switching to a set like 4-piece Mirror Chassé, where you just want to play above 50%. You just want to use Furina. Furina is that good, it is worth it. unfortunately. Furina is an HP scaling Hydra character. This also means she synergizes very well with other Hydra characters. The big example is Yelan. The trade-offs between Yelan and Xingqiu exist in the exact same ways as the trade-offs between Yelan and Furina, which is pretty interesting to point out. Makes you think. Maybe they went the opposite direction with some of the Pyro supports. But Yelan plus Furina and a healer can basically be played with any character in the game. It's the new version of the Yelan Xingqiu team. It's just good. It's disgustingly good. I can't say enough nice things about how good it looks on paper. Yelan damage percent passive does stack with Furina's additively, so you're just getting a bunch more damage for your on-fielder. It's really nice. If you do care about the defensive utility that Xingqiu provides, personally I don't, because Furina necessitates using a healer anyway, so you will be protected no matter what. But if you do want the defensive utility Xingqiu offers, he is always available. He will just be a bit less damage. That doesn't mean he's bad, you can use him anyway. Big red alert glaring on your screen right now. Furina does everything she does at C0. Her constellations are in no way necessary. They're in, especially the 5-star weapon is in no way necessary. It's not even as great as it possibly sounds because of the energy requirement situation. Do not overpull. Don't spend money you don't have. If you are a waifu gamer, supposedly all of the coming 5 stars for the rest of version 4.0 are women. Definitely something to mention. Furina is more than good enough and does all of the things I've complimented her for doing at C0. She does not have bad synergy at C0 with the roster. She has all of that synergy with the roster always. Furina has a pretty interesting constellation suite. Her constellations also recently changed, so we're going to be talking about that a little bit in depth. Furina's Constellation 1 gives her upfront 150 stacks on her burst when it is cast. It increases the cap by only 100. This moves your cap to 400, but the amount of stacks you generate to fully stack her damage percent passive is now 250. What does this mean for C1? Honestly, nothing. It only matters for C2, which we're going to talk about next. But before that, I want to talk about there being a major difference between just maxing it and maxing it early. There's such a thing called an average fanfare, which is what you really want to be maximizing with Furina. If you care about her buff, it's not about how many stacks you generate. It's about how soon they're generated and how long you're keeping them, meaning within the 18-second window. You want to generate your stacks at the closer to the beginning, so your team benefits from more damage percent sooner. You have a higher average buff. Furina's Constellation 2 multiplies her fanfare generation by 3.5 for every stack generated at C0/C1. After you cap, the cap is like 60 or 80, something like that. You cap out the damage percent insanely quickly. With C2, after it is capped out, there is an HP passive. The HP passive increases Furina's personal damage. So because of the C1 cap reduction on amount of stacks you generate for the full damage percent buff, that change did not impact C1, it impacted C2, because you're not generating as much damage percent as you were at C2. So for reference, let's say you max out at C1 8 seconds into your rotation. C2 has no impact on that for your average, or virtually none. If you are playing single target healers like Bennett or Shinobu, who were not generating as many stacks as someone like Jean or Baizhu or Charlotte, then yes, C2 does also give you additional stacks. Her HP percent passive caps out at 186 C0 generated stacks. So if you were maxing out C1, even sooner you're maxing out her HP bonus from C2. It is virtually full uptime. Because of that, it's pretty interesting. It's a very sizable personal damage increase, but if you do only care about Furina's damage percent passive, the key constellations are C1 and C3. C3 is talent levels for her burst. This is more healing bonus, more damage percent. It is 24 damage percent at talent level 10 to talent level 13. Her C4 is an energy refund. This basically drops her energy requirement by 15-20%. By doing this, it creates a larger difference between her 5-star weapon options and her 4-star weapon options, specifically the 4-star weapon options that are ER main stats, because those tend to be the better one. C5 is animal damage, generally about 16%, pretty good. Her C6 is going to take me a minute. We've written quite a bit about Furina's C6. Get seated. She gets a Hydro Infusion for 6 hits after using her elemental skill for the next 10 seconds. So this has to be used within 10 seconds of her elemental skill cast, and it does only last 6 hits. That being said, it does not only last 6 normal attack hits / charge attack hits. It actually lasts 4 or 5, because the Arca hits that are generated every 6 seconds from her stance normal attacks do count for her C6. There are 2 effects for her C6. There is the Wisa stance effect, which is 4% healing per second for 2.5 seconds party-wide. The duration of this effect increases by 2.5 seconds for each hit in the Wisa stance. What does this mean? Furina at C6 doesn't need a healer anymore in the team. This is mostly impactful if you are very heavily Primo Gem invested in more offensive character options. So let's say the difference between Jean and Kazuha becomes much larger if your Kazuha is C2. That would be why Furina's C6 would be something important. Otherwise, the damage difference is not the most impactful thing in the world, but it still technically is a gain, and it's definitely worth mentioning that you can not use a healer when Furina is C6. For reference, this is for every party member. 4% of Furina's healing times the amount of healing bonus you get. She also has a ton of additional HP. Additional HP from C2. It all stacks together. It's very good. The Numa passive, it is 25 HP scaling on the C6 hits in Numa stance. Numa stance is the stance she is in never before C6. It's the utility one where she puts down a healer. She generates no energy. She does no damage. She just kills you. It's nice. Whenever you're in this stance, Furina will also be healing herself, because Furina is also the highest HP character in the team. That is just a fact. She will be. So she'll also be the hardest one to heal. Getting heals on herself during the Numa stance, very nice. So our expected optimal C6 combos will be using both stances. You'll be looking at 3 and 3 or 2 and 4 splits for her Numa Wisa effects. You're able to trigger the stance switch by doing a charge attack. The charge attack also does not trigger the Arca, so you can do charge attack N1C. That is 1 hit Wisa, 3 hits Numa, and then an N1 is 1 hit in Wisa. So this is a 3 and 3 combo. This one is a 2 and 3 combo. The N1 does trigger an Arca here, but the Arca is not buffed by C6, so it will not trigger the C6 effect. And you're doing 4 hits in Wisa. You can also do something like N1C charged attack N2, which is 1 hit in Numa, 5 hits in Wisa. Here is some additional information from Dekadey. Our partner has TC stuff with Furina mains. For Furina's highest personal DPS, your rotation would be charge attack and 4 charge attack. This requires you to slot a healer. This is basically all hit Numa combo. The reason we don't recommend doing this is because Furina can be your healer. You can use more character options in your team. If you do only care about seeing big numbers on Furina's charge attack, not charge attack, normal attacks and charge attacks, you would be doing that, assuming there's already a healer. Using the healer is more preferred for team DPS. If you don't slot in healer anymore, you can do higher damage. Something I have not written here, but I will mention, Furina's C6 should have an attack scaling component as well because of the base talent from her normal attack. So if you want to do funny vapes, she does receive Bennett's buff on her C6 damage through a small portion of her scalings. So her talent damage at C6 ends up being the normal attack plus the HP scale, which is 18 generally and plus an additional 25 if in Numa stance. Yeah, that's Furina's C6. Oh my god. Complicated. I believe that's all we have to say about Furina.